Welcome to Apothecary Tales, the basics of pharmacology. Today we're going to talk about an important pathway with a simple video, that is the arachidonic acid pathway. Now this pathway, to give you a basic description, plays a very important role in cardiovascular biology, carcinogenesis and many of the inflammatory diseases like asthma, arthritis, etc. So, in this video, we are going to see what is happening in the arachidonic acid pathway and what the different class of drugs which acts as the anti-inflammatory in this pathway. So, let's look into this video. Arachidonic acid is mainly synthesized or metabolized from the membrane phospholipids. From the membrane phospholipids, the phospholipase A2 enzyme is responsible for metabolizing these phospholipids into arachidonic acid. Now, when there is an injury or inflammation, it is this time this arachidonic acid is released and oxygenated by various other enzymes so that the inflammatory mediators are produced and is responsible for causing the inflammation. So mainly this arachidonic acid is subjected to two pathways. First one is the cyclooxygenase pathway. Second one is the lipooxygenase pathway. In cyclooxygenase pathway, the main enzyme responsible for the metabolism of arachidonic acid is cyclooxygenase. There are two isoforms of it, COX-1 and COX-2, which you will be learning in detail in the NSAIDs chapter. So now, to just understand, arachidonic acid mainly gets converted or metabolized by cyclooxygenase enzyme in cyclooxygenase pathway to mainly two mediators. They are prostaglandins and thromboxane A2. Now, looking into the lipooxygenase pathway, they are mainly responsible for metabolism of arachidonic acid to 5-HETE and leukotrienes. 5-HETE is nothing else but hydroxy-icosapentaenoic acid. So these mediators are mainly produced by the metabolism of arachidonic acid by lipooxygenase enzyme into these mediators. So which is the major class of anti-inflammatory drugs? Yes, the corticosteroids. Corticosteroids mainly act as the anti-inflammatory agents by inhibiting this phospholipase A2 enzyme. By doing so, the arachidonic acid is not being synthesized or metabolized from the phospholipids and thereby the remaining inflammatory mediators are not produced. As a result, this is the way in which it causes the anti-inflammatory action. Next, coming into the cyclooxygenase pathway, the COX enzymes are mainly inhibited by the NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. The NSAIDs basically inhibit the COX enzymes and thereby prevent the prostaglandins and thromboxane A2 synthesis and thereby inhibit their action. Now, in lipooxygenase pathway, the major class of drug inhibiting the lipooxygenase enzyme is leukotriene modifiers. The leukotriene modifiers basically inhibit this lipooxygenase enzyme and thereby prevents the 5-HETE and leukotrienes. So you might have heard about leukotriene modifiers specifically in asthmatic conditions. So what does this mediators basically do? The 5-HETE is mainly responsible as an inflammatory mediator in lung disease. It is responsible for increasing the mucus production, induce airway contraction, and potentiates the neutrophil chemotaxis. The leukotrienes is one of the major inflammatory mediator in the asthmatic condition. So, the leukotriene modifiers inhibits the lipoxygenase enzyme and thereby prevents the major inflammatory mediators responsible for the asthmatic condition. So, this is the way in which the different drugs like corticosteroids, NSAIDs, leukotriene modifiers act on the arachidonic acid pathway. So now let's quickly look into the different mediators like prostaglandins and thromboxane A2 functions. Prostaglandins and thromboxane A2 that is produced in the cyclooxygenase pathway is collectively termed as prostanoids. They are lipid autocoids. They both sustain homeostatic functions and mediate pathogenic mechanisms including the inflammatory response. Prostaglandins are of different types. As you can see here, there is prostaglandin E2, D2, F2 alpha, I2. So let's look into the different functions mediated by these prostaglandins. Prostaglandin E2 is responsible for the vasodilatory action, bronchodilation, uterine contraction. Whereas prostaglandin D2 is responsible for vasodilation or contraction, bronchoconstriction, uterine contraction. Prostaglandin F2 alpha is responsible for vasoconstriction, bronchoconstriction, uterine contraction. And finally, prostaglandin I2, which is also termed as prostacyclin, is responsible for vasodilatory action, bronchodilation, uterine relaxation over here. Apart from these actions, it also inhibits the platelet aggregation. That means it is inhibiting the clot formation. So this is the overall idea or picture of how the different prostaglandins act. Finally, to talk about thromboxane A2, it is responsible for activating the platelet aggregation. Activate the platelet aggregation means it is responsible for causing the platelet clot formation. So this is an overview of what is the action of prostaglandins and thromboxane A2. So the NSAIDs, which act by inhibiting the cyclooxygenase, prevents the synthesis of prostaglandins and thromboxane A2, thereby opposing the actions as you can see here. So with that, I wind up today's topic, arachidonic acid pathway. So in this video, we have learned how the arachidonic acid So that's all for today. Thank you. For more interesting videos, like, share and subscribe.